thank you very much, and very pleased to be with you again, if only again remotely. And I'm hoping one day to be able to come down and speak to you directly in person. The Polish poet Czesław Miłosz, who was a witness to the Warsaw Ghetto, once wrote, "If we are capable of compassion and at the same time are powerless, then we live in a state of desperate exasperation." And I think all of us will have experienced that sentiment across the past 2 years as we've seen Israel's genocide unfold, and maybe experiencing it particularly now as we enter what could perhaps be described as the second phase of this genocide, a phase whose gateway has been constructed via the so-called ceasefire introduced in October, and now the UN Security Council resolution passed this week. It is a ceasefire agreement, and I should be using inverted commas there, that, as we at PSC acknowledged when it was called, has, of course, reduced the scale of daily slaughter and has reduced the risk of mass starvation by increasing the amount of food and supplies entering Gaza, but a ceasefire agreement that asks us to tolerate, while still regarding it to be intact, the ongoing killings of Palestinians in Gaza, Israel still using access to aid as a weapon of war. Since the agreement was signed on October the 10th, Israel's killed over 300 Palestinians, destroyed in the zone it fully controls, the so-called yellow zone, over 1,500 Palestinian homes. Some of you, maybe many of you, will have seen the scenes this week as Israel launched strikes on Gaza City and Khan Yunis that killed 33 Palestinians in a single night. You will have seen the images once more. Infant bodies being pulled out from the rubble, hanging in the rescuers and their parents' hands. Limp rag dolls before being lined up lifeless on blankets. Scenes that ought to be ones, any normal times, of unimaginable horror, which have become normalized after 2 years of genocide, but now scenes, as I say, that we're being asked to accept as consistent with an ongoing functioning ceasefire, all whilst Israel allows in less than half of the food and supplies needed urgently as winter arrives, and 2 million Palestinians live without adequate shelter. Now the UN Security Council, having failed for 2 years due to the US veto to act to prevent the genocide, now finally acts. It acts not to enforce international law, but to violate it, not to respect the core purposes of the United Nations, but to abrogate them. It passes a resolution that disempowers the victims of genocide and empowers the perpetrators, that effectively hands over the control of Gaza to the United States, a co-perpetrator. Resolution that allows for Israel's participation in decision-making over Gaza's present and future, denies that right to Palestinians who have no say in their governance, no say in how their land is to be rebuilt, no say in how aid is to be distributed to them. The UN Security Council, through this resolution, has become an instrument for the continued illegal occupation, for ongoing genocide, and a willful violator of international law. International Court of Justice, the world's highest court, in July 2024, confirmed what we all know, that the Palestinian people have a right to self-determination on their land. This resolution empowers foreign forces to govern them in violation of that right. That same ICJ judgment determined that Israel's illegal occupation of Palestinian land should end immediately, nearly 18 months ago. This resolution empowers states to support the continuation of the occupation of Gaza and says nothing about the rest of occupied Palestine. Further, it contains no mention of genocide, despite the fact that Israel is on trial at the ICJ for perpetration of that crime, and its leader still indicted by the International Criminal Court. Nothing about the ongoing ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, the escalation of settler violence. Nothing about the nearly 10,000 Palestinians still held in illegitimate detention, subject to the most brutal forms of torture, including rape. As Craig Mokaba put it in an article in Mondevice this week, and I quote, "Not since the UN partitioned Palestine in 1947 against the will of the indigenous people, setting the stage for 80 years of Nakba, has the UN acted in such a baldly colonial way and trampled so recklessly on the rights of a people." And this resolution, of course, also mandates an armed force, the so-called International Stabilization Force, reporting directly to Donald Trump and his Board of Peace, which will act in collaboration with Israel, the perpetrator of genocide, to demilitarize Gaza, meaning disarming the Palestinian resistance, but of course not disarming Israel. So this is Donald Trump's vision of peace, for which he is being applauded by the lapdogs who endorsed this resolution, including Keir Starmer. No right of self-determination for the Palestinian people, a mandate for Israel to continue the occupation of Gaza and by default the West Bank, to sustain its system of apartheid on all of the land between the river and the sea. A peace to be built via an alliance between the imperial United States, Gulf dictatorships, and a nuclear-armed apartheid state led by politicians who make no secret of their desire to eventually establish a greater Israel, stretching all the way from the Mediterranean Sea to the Euphrates, and thereby incorporating swathes of Lebanon, of Egypt, of Jordan, of Syria, of Saudi Arabia, and of Iraq. So in this moment, we need to reassert some fundamental truths. Firstly, that there is and cannot be any pathway to peace that is not rooted in justice, in rights, in accountability, and in respect for international law. Secondly, the battle for justice and liberation of the Palestinian people is, more than ever, a battle for the future of humanity. Do we want a world where principles of rights and justice and respect for the rule of law are secondary to the will and military might of the powerful? This is a question which pertains not just to the international arena, but to the domestic one. Peter Oborne has addressed this very well in his recent book, Complicity, where he outlines how support for Israel's genocide has ripped asunder the fabric of British democracy. It is a complicity that has been sustained via the ignoring of public opinion, that has been sustained via the complicity of the media, including the BBC, which has fundamentally failed to fulfill its role to tell the truth about the genocide, to the point of even refusing to utter its name. And it is a complicity sustained via the increasing usage of draconian powers to suppress protest and dissent that are specifically motivated by a desire to suppress our Palestine movement, but threaten the rights of everyone. So this second phase of genocide is marked by a project to re-normalize Israel, to treat it once more as a normally functioning democratic ally, to change the conversation away from genocide and apartheid and British complicity in those crimes into a conversation about sustaining the ceasefire and building the peace. This is right now our core task, to resist this process and to continue to build the movement required to establish a true peace, one founded upon an ending of Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people and the realization of their rights. And that, as it has always done, requires two conditions. Firstly, the ongoing resistance of the Palestinian people and their refusal to submit to Israel's plans for their erasure. And secondly, external pressure exerted on Israel by a global mass solidarity movement that answers the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment and sanctions. This is the pathway which we at PSC will lay out again in our annual plan at our annual general meeting in February, to continue to apply every lever of pressure we can on our government for sanctions and a full arms embargo, to build campaigns for divestment by public bodies, including local councils via their pension funds, for unions to campaign in their workplaces to end all of the complicity of their employers, to call for shops to stop stocking all Israeli goods and to target complicit companies like Barclays Bank, and to vigorously defend our right to protest, including working to defeat the government plans to further reduce that right via clauses in the Crime and Policing Bill. So to return to where I started, our task and the way in which we overcome any sense of desperation is by recognizing the power of our collective voice. Israel did not want to end its full-scale military assault on Gaza. It has been forced to do so because of its increasing isolation in the General Assembly, within global civil society, and across global public opinion and in the street. Donald Trump for once told the truth when he said to Netanyahu, "You cannot fight the whole world." He was referring to the increasing threat of boycott and sanction against Israel that this plan for peace and this resolution are designed to dilute. Here in the UK, alongside the marches of unprecedented size and duration, we have been winning important BDS victories upon which we need to build. 27 local councils have now committed to divest funds. The Co-op has withdrawn all Israeli goods from its shelves, and there has been a nearly 20% reduction in import of Israeli goods into the UK. Over 5,000 customers have closed their account with Barclays, and music festivals have dropped it as a sponsor. This is our core task, to harness our collective power, but to build it further. We do so knowing that the struggle is long. But as I said, that this struggle is a struggle for the justice and for the rights of the Palestinian people, but also a struggle for the world we want for ourselves and for our children, for the tomorrow that we want to see. We know that that world cannot come into being, that none of us can be free until the Palestinian people are free. Onwards together, to freedom, to justice and to equality.